And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wartburg and Fusion Entertainment Review. I'm your host, Thomas, aka Mr. Wartburg, and alongside me, as always, is my friend Patrick, aka Mr. Fusion.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. A lot of content to go over today.
Oh man, we've got
Plenty of
s- we've got
plenty to
s-
talk about.
so much since we last recorded, which was a little over almost 4 weeks ago now, as I was down in
Yeah,
Austin, Texas, and we
that's right.
ranked the MCU, all the MCU films, all 29 of them, and it
Mhm.
was an absolute blast. I had a ton of
Yep.
fun. Fusion even bought a huge ass whiteboard for it. It was a great time. I would highly recommend you all go watch that stream because it
Yeah.
was, or actually, we recorded that. We didn't stream it. I'm glad we didn't try because the T-Mobile internet I had down there was less than stable, let's say. It had moments where it was very good, but oof, there was some times like Jesus, I could dial up faster than that. 5G internet is like I think we're one gen away from true, like I think 6G internet, whatever they call that, or whenever 5G gets fully built out. I think that's going to be something, but we're not there yet.
I think we're pretty close though with Starlink. The only problem is it's not.
The
Musk
latency,
hasn't made it. Yeah, the latency, and he hasn't made it an accessible technology for like the end consumer. Put it like that.
yeah, it's getting there, but I think we're a
Getting
couple
there.
one to two iterations of that technology away from it really taking off,
Yeah.
which will be pretty cool because I live in the middle of nowhere. More options is always a good thing. Speaking of good things, we've got a lot to talk about. Like we said, we've got Andor, we've got She-Hulk, we've got House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, some Star Trek to talk about, plus the Last of Us trailer dropped, which we'll be live reacting to that here at twitch.tv/MrWartburg. Because don't forget, everyone, we live stream most of our episodes over at said Twitch channel, which is my own personal one. And we will record our podcasts for editing later, but also to interact with chat as we give our thoughts and opinions on the news of the day when it comes to all things pop culture. So, Fusion, where do you want to start tonight for episode 51? Should we start with our usual or watch and playing?
Well, I'll be I'll be honest with you. We pre-show prep. A lot of watching was a lot of the content we're going to talk about today. I'll be quite honest. Outside of a few things, since we last did the podcast, I had jumped into. I decided because we had talked a couple podcasts before number 50 about how HBO was pulling some of their IPs off of their network, what that was going to mean for the future of just streaming in general, and it got me kind of worried because Netflix has kind of done the same thing, and we talked about like having physical media. So man, I've been on a spending spree buying a shit ton of 4K Blu-rays. That's what I've been doing. Like my shelf went from like 3 Blu-rays to like 2 shelves full of 4K ultra high definition Blu-rays. I've been buying a lot of box sets, so this hasn't been cheap. Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, The Godfather, the entire current Mission Impossible, the Kelvin timeline of Star Trek, like the other original Star Trek motion pictures. Like, been
Did you
buying a
buy
lot
the
of them.
box set of the
Yes,
six movies?
all 6 movies. Yes.
I can't. I've loved that that's out. I'm so
Yeah.
glad I didn't pull the trigger on 1 through 4 a couple years ago. Damn, 1 through 6 4K. I'm buying that.
Now there is a 10 box set with the TNG movies as well.
I might have to check that
And
out because
so
First
yeah.
Contact is legit a wonderful sci-fi movie.
Yep. Well, I mean, yeah, so I have the original Series 6 box set, which was cool, but like I thought about buying the 10 because like Generations is kind of a weird, but it's a good handoff movie, if that makes sense. Like moving from one group of cast to another of the Star Trek realm. But, after that, like it just Undiscovered Country was a very meh movie,
Oh, excuse me? Undiscovered Country
Uh,
fucking rules.
I was
How
okay with
dare
it.
you?
It's no Wrath of Khan, man. Wrath
No,
of
Wrath of
Khan
Khan
is
is untouchable. Like it is
it's the
the
quintessential
pinnacle.
Star Trek movie, man.
Undiscovered Country is a fantastic film. Are you shitting me? Christopher Plummer as General Chang, one of the greatest villain performances in science fiction. Period. It's amazing.
I just never like it just never I'm not saying it's a bad movie. It just wasn't one of my favorite Star
You
Trek
said it
films.
was
It's
meh.
not.
Meh means bad.
Meh.
Okay.
No, no, not for
Meh
me.
has
Meh
a
does not
negative
mean
connotation.
okay, okay, okay.
Okay.
Okay, let me retract my meh in this situation. Undiscovered Country isn't one of my favorite Star Trek films. How about that?
Okay, I'm gonna clip this whole thing out and send it to Carl, and I will get Carl's opinion. As he's a huge Trekkie. I think he actually worked on Picard too, if I
Okay.
recall. That or he was on some
Okay.
sets that they filmed with Picard. But I know he has worked in that industry, and I remember hearing that in passing from him on the broadcast server. I'll have to get his thoughts on this conversation.
And Carl's probably gonna get pissed, but for me, growing up, as a kid in the '80s, Wrath of Khan and The
Oh
Voyage
yeah,
Home are the best one-two punch films you'll ever
Voyage
watch.
Home is phenomenal. Voyage Home is hilarious.
Yeah,
It is I think one of the films of that era, along with Wrath of Khan, that like is a template for how you can tell Star Trek stories in a 2 hour format.
yeah,
Some of the others, like Motion Picture was meandering. Insurrections was basically a 2 part episode, though a good
yep.
one. They just ran out of money, and you can definitely tell. Oh, that's where they run out of money. But those two movies, you're not wrong. Those are great movies. But I would put Undiscovered Country on that threshold.
Okay, okay, all right.
I mean, you got to see Captain Sulu command the Excelsior,
Yeah,
and
that's
they
true. That's
blow the
true.
fuck out of a bird of
Okay,
prey, save
yeah,
and the
yeah.
Kittimer Accords. And I saw on Twitter that was a whole bit where it was one of the first bits of movie TV synergy because just like a month later, Leonard Nimoy would be on Next Generation
Yep.
and have the crossover where he was talking to one of the lieutenants about how he helped end the Federation Klingon conflict and found the Kittimer Accords. And that's what
Which
happens
is
in Undiscovered Country.
which is a crazy because I don't know if did you ever watch the Spock documentary? They Call Me
I
Spock.
need to. It has
You
been
need
on
to
my
watch it
bucket list for like watch
because
this.
the whole back channel stuff with Leonard Nimoy and the movies is such an interesting thing because of how it went from "we want you back, I don't want to do this" to it was almost like a Harrison Ford level of "I don't want to be this character anymore. I've moved on to I am Spock. This is who like it's not all I am, but it's a big deal for me going to the conventions and saying, "Holy shit, let me start jumping in." Like he jumps into it full and he just goes once he gets back into the momentum of it, he becomes like he embraces it for the rest of his life, right? Because at the back end of his life, he was doing the Kelvin movies. It was just
Mhm.
like what it was. There was a point where though he was like, I need more than just
Well,
being this
I'm sure part
character.
of that had to do with him and Shatner got not getting along.
That's the other thing they kind of touch on, but they don't touch on was William Shatner's a bit of a piece of shit. Let's just be real
Yeah,
about it. Like
he's the
he's a bit of
prima
a piece of
donna
shit.
dick.
Yeah, and he made life hard for a lot of those guys, but they all loved each other. They all
Yeah.
loved each other, and I will say they speak begrudgingly. Like there are times where they say he's a dick, but he's our dick. Like he's our asshole. There's kind of a weird, almost embracing it in a way. And of course, he's gotten. I think he's gotten softer as he's gotten older, obviously. But the good thing is that now they break his balls at conventions, which is great. They just like they rip into him, which I love. But yeah, but anyway, man. So I've been watching a lot of the box set stuff, catching up with that. Obviously, House of Dragons, obviously Rings of Power, obviously She-Hulk, and then Wednesday, Andor kicked me right in the balls, and I'm so happy it did because I want to talk about this show. And that's really it, man. Very little video games. Jumped into Apex a little bit. That's about it. Honestly, been real quiet on the video game front the last few weeks. Been a lot of work stuff going on, so it's easier to watch movies and kind of planning game time for me. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I actually picked up the slack on the video game front. I actually
Yeah.
started and beat a whole Game Pass game this past weekend. Metal Hellsinger, which is like a Doom style metal themed rhythm beat game. So
Okay.
it's a rhythm based shooter, which is pretty unique for me. I don't play many rhythm games, and so you got to like if you attack on the beat, you do more damage, kind
Yeah.
of thing. And you can build your combos in your multiplayer. And it like though how they layered the music was in a very unique way. So that way, the higher your combo, the more layers to the music. So instead of just like drums or the guitar, they would start layering in the bits, and then finally, if you got max combo, you would get the vocals. And it was done
Sure.
by like actual metal artists. It was someone from System of a Down, a few other bigger names you're going to be familiar with, and some of the smaller labels too. And it was an extremely well done $30 title. Like the story's nothing to write home about because I mean it's a $30 title. You're not exactly
Yeah.
getting a expertly crafted AAA storytelling
Sure.
experience.
Sure. 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 Sure.
It's a metal based rhythm shooter where you're playing as a demon fighting other demons.
Okay.
I
Oh,
mean
I like
it
that.
is what it is. You're blowing shit
Okay.
up and you're headbanging to some metal, right? It was a very good time. Uh,
Huh?
Continuing my Hollow Knight run, I am like 14 hours in the game and I have no idea how far I am from the end. I should ask Jen how far I am from the end. At least the first ending, because I know there's multiple endings. But like you, I've been watching a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. one I doubt we're going to get too much of. I've been loving Star Trek Lower Decks. It
Okay.
has season 2 is when it's really found its voice. Yeah, even back half of season 1, but season 2 was like, oh damn, this is a good Trek. This is a good Trek comedy. Now it's just fuck. This show rules. Great characters. You're getting awesome character beats with individuals that you don't often or haven't gotten full explorations of, and they're really just absolutely owning that the fact that this isn't the fourth wall isn't just something they wink at. The fourth wall is like a foundational pillar of this show. You've got one of the characters just absolutely going off on these conspiracy theorists in this episode, and he's like ranting about how like the doctor spent 7 years in the Delta Quadrant, he deserves rights, motherfucker, and he's like just absolutely going to town. And of course that character's voiced by Jack Quaid. It was a wonderful meta experience, and I love how just into it at every level this show is, from the writers to the people behind the characters. The animation is top notch for what they're going for. I really, really love this show. And since its 30th anniversary is coming up, and I've been rewatching Deep Space Nine, which to
Okay.
me,
Cool.
seasons 4 through 7 of Deep Space Nine are some of the best sci-fi storytelling of all time. And you can 100% tell Ronald Moore was crafting that shit.
Sure.
And he was, of course, would go on to Battlestar Galactica. Man, what he could do now with Star Trek, a guy like him. Post-Dominion War, something set like right before Picard, like in that Picard's retired and Federation's, like figuring out where it's gonna go, or even post Picard. I would love to see what he would do in the prime now post Picard season 3 Star Trek universe.
Okay.
That would be a really cool thing to see. So that's where I'm at on new content beyond what we're going to talk of today, except for one thing. Speaking of physical media, I went and I bought something because it was $30 for the Blu-ray set.
Nice.
I bought Nikita because it's not on any streaming services. I mean,
Nope.
first off, it's Maggie Q. What the fuck are you doing streaming services? Like, I think Netflix has the CW rights. Why is this not there? I don't know. But it's $30 for all 4 seasons, and it's absolutely 100% worth it. Buy that shit. It's a UK import, but I tested it on both consoles, and it works perfectly.
So is it a UK import or is it just a region-free version?
It says it doesn't say region free, which is what, like, it's got the compatibility alert on Amazon.
Sure.
Because I'm on a UK or US account, and you got to buy it through the UK store, or not UK store, but like it knows it's a UK seller, so it tells you a compatibility alert, but it works fine. So
Okay.
ignore
Cool.
that part.
Yeah, I'm having to learn about this because, if you buy a region-free version of a movie versus a US-based version of the movie, what the US-based version has usually is it has multiple formats of the movie for you, like in 1080, 4K, like it has, and then if it'll give you different versions, whereas the region-free, they usually only have one version of the film on the disc, which is interesting to me. I would think internationally they would like load everything up on there, but apparently not.
But
So
generally, region
whatever.
frees aren't like, I don't want to say cheaper, but like they're less frills. You're
Yeah.
not going to get all the special features, and
Yep. Yep.
it's meant to be a quick. Hey, here's just the movie.
Speaking of, I learned about this week. One of my favorite like Kevin Smith movies. Did you realize
Yeah,
do you know how much Dogma Blu-rays are going for
it's a
on
lot.
eBay?
That era of DVD filmmaking, like when we were converting VHS to DVD, there is so many movies that did not get or have not continued to get a proper Blu-ray conversion.
Yep.
Like even some shows from that era that were popular don't have Blu-rays. Like one that was a pretty popular sci-fi show, like 2 of them really. I think it's Eureka and Warehouse 13, when that kind of
Okay.
like, sci-fi was changing to sci-fi,
Yeah.
and it's hard to find them. Like, and they were not unpopular shows, It was right during the era of Battlestar Galactica. Sci-fi was still a pretty big name,
Yep.
and they don't make the discs anymore.
Yeah, they made I think they made one run in 2008,
Yeah,
one
for
print
Dogma, yeah.
for Dogma, and that was it in '08. That was the only print. So now people are selling them for like $200 open, but like there's one selling for like almost $1,000
Mhm.
for sealed. I don't know where someone kept a sealed Blu-ray, but they probably from like an auction or something from like a Blockbuster
Yeah.
or something like that. But like, yeah, I didn't realize because I was watching a TikTok of a guy talking about Blu-rays, and he starts throwing stacks of them, and he pulls out a Dogma, and then the guy watching it was like, This guy just casually has a Dogma Blu-ray, not knowing how much it costs. And I go to the comments, and people are like, "Yeah, dude, that's just fucking crazy." And so I started doing some research. I'm like, "Holy shit, $200 for Dogma? Like, of all the movies, yeah, it's interesting to think about that." And there's a couple of other old time movies that are going for like $400 or $500. It's not the highest priced auction DVD. There are some other ones like very old school artsy films that they only did like a short print on Blu-ray, actual like a official Blu-ray release, but it was like 100,000 copies, and people didn't like, and no one could find them anymore. It's crazy to me how something like that just can become a collector's item so fast, man.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for one of my mini movies to become a thing where I can like turn it around. But I kind of like looking at my physical shelf. I've got a I mean, look at behind me. I like having physical stuff. And I have
Yeah.
a lot of movies, both DVD and now Blu-ray, and I'm converting to 4K Blu-ray. So I'm in the process of buying, a bunch of different discs like yourself to kind of re-up my collection. Got my eye on a few I'm going to buy for Black Friday. Plus Top Gun Maverick. I'm going to be
I
buying
will
the
tell you, man.
original and Maverick.
Yep. Everything, everywhere, all at once is beautiful in
Oh, I
4K,
have it on
man.
4K. I bought this year. I've every movie I've seen that I like loved in theaters, I've bought
Yeah.
on 4K. So I bought Everything Everywhere All at Once, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, The Batman, and there was a fourth one. I bought Afterlife because I saw it late last year.
The studio that did Everything Everywhere All at Once, A24. Do you know anything like, have you heard of
They've got
this? Is
a
this
lot
a
of
lot of great independent, like they're an independent studio, but like they have a bunch of like
their
really
library
good
is fantastic.
movies. And they've only been around since 2013. To think
Yeah,
about that.
and there's a lot of
Not
really
even
high
a decade.
profile ones too.
Yep. Like Spring Breakers is one of them. What started this was for me was like that deep dive after we had talked. I started dipping into Blu-rays, but just dumping into like physical media, and I had to buy some of the independent movies. Like one of my favorite ones I bought in 4K, Jean Reno and Natalie Portman and Leon the Professional. You know, I had to make sure that that cut had the international version of it, just because I absolutely love that version of the movie. That was Natalie Portman's first picture. Wonderful movie, man. Just a fantastic film. But I was talking to a buddy of mine, and that string of horror films that's coming out that came out. What's her name? Oh my gosh, I'm pulling
You
it
mean
up right
Happy Death
now.
Day?
No, no,
No,
no, no,
that's
no, 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 no.
Bloomhouse.
Pearl.
Yeah,
It was X and then Pearl, and then the third film is Maxine. It's a trilogy. But what's crazy about that is X came out earlier this year. Pearl just came out last week. They announced that they're doing the third part of the trilogy, and they're filming it right now, but they're trying to shoot to release it in December. So like we're gonna get a trilogy of horror films, like grindhouse classics. That's what these are, grindhouse. And A24 does they have some really good independent films, some really good sci-fi, like Deus Ex Machina
hmm
is one of their films. Spring Breakers is weird.
they had Green Knight last year.
Green Knight, Bodies is a weird one that just came out, but apparently it's really really good. But they're doing this Grindhouse series, and they're going to release it within a
That's
calendar
crazy.
year.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and if you like Grindhouse movies, you got to go watch X. And I saw Pearl at the Draft House last week. It's old school fucked up.
Oh,
Let's put it like
that
that.
reminds me. I need to buy The Black Phone because that was a very good
Okay.
movie.
Yep,
If you never
there you go.
if you never
Yeah.
saw that, that was a fantastic movie.
But
Very
like if you go
weird
through the
Stephen
list,
King story.
and well, just since we're just on a tangent about this kind of stuff, media and stuff, but like A24, if you go and look at their wiki, you're like, holy shit, that's their movie, that's their movie. Like, and it's not all just one genre, but it's a ton of good different films, man.
Yeah.
Like you said, the Green Knight's just stashed in here amongst all these films, and then of course this year, I think Everything Everywhere All at Once really set them as a big player in Hollywood going forward.
Oh yeah.
But their mindset is they do the films they want, how they want them. They're not going to let Hollywood dictate to them how to tell the stories to sell them, which is good because then you get a good film.
Fair enough. Oh yeah,
But
for sure.
enough of that rant. But it's just been really fun just catching up. Like I said, after we had talked in person, we had started talking about, we kind of like while we were doing the list mentioned like physical media, and that had really got me thinking about like I want to be able to buy some of my favorite films again because we don't know what's going to happen. You purchase digitally on Amazon, but in your agreement, it states that you don't technically have the rights at 100%, that they can pull it off their catalog should they decide to. And at some point, these companies are going to start worrying about their cloud server space. It's going to become an issue for them. So, yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Like, and you never know. Like, when will it be a tax write off?
exactly.
Who knows how all that works? It's
I
crazy.
mean, HBO's pulling films just because they don't want to deal with paying royalties out. That's pretty fucked up, man.
Yeah,
People were getting, I mean, mid movie while people were watching, they cut it off, just cut it off because they don't want to have to pay for these things anymore. They're gonna want to like streamline things. Disney will probably do it at some point because they own a shit ton of all that Fox stuff that they're like, okay, well, we don't want to have to deal with all the royalties to some of these shows. Let's just take them away for a while, which is what Netflix does too. So I wouldn't be shocked if we start seeing a lot of movies and a lot of IP getting pulled from these streaming services over the next couple of years for them to as a cost cutting measure. Honestly,
especially as money becomes more expensive because interest
yeah,
rates are going up.
yeah,
That's definitely a component for the businesses. I mean, there's no way in today's day and age someone's going to get as in debt as AT&T was just a few years ago.
oh yeah, oh
They
yeah,
were insanely in debt,
yep,
which is
yep,
one of the reasons they sold everything, the Warner stuff to Discovery and tried for the merger. But there's no way in today's environment with the interest rates where they are that that's going to happen. Mergers will still continue to happen, but no one's going to sink that much just basically free money into something.
yeah,
Just crazy.
yeah.
So
I
things are going
agree.
to go through a price and contraction there.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, man, let's jump into what the content for this the last couple weeks. Let's do this, man.
So should we start with the newest thing?
Yeah, let's start with it. Let's go
All right, let's
for it.
start with Andor, which the first 3 episodes dropped last Wednesday. Got
Yeah,
episode 4 here in a couple of days. So Fusion, first 3 episodes now. Our buddy Chris, our mutual friend, who we are both agreed does not like, for some reason, Ragnarok because he's weird. He also didn't like Andor. He thought it
that's
was just slow. That was his like overall takeaway. Where did you come
okay.
down on Andor?
I think it's a fantastic show, man. Reason being is the complaint we always hear from people, it could be casual people, people we have conversations with when it comes to Star Wars content, like with Mando, with Bad Batch, with I'm sure it's gonna come up with Ahsoka, with all these shows with Obi-Wan. We're tired of Jedi versus Sith saga. We're tired of that story. What this does, it tells you, remember, this is a galaxy far, far away. Well, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts that have to happen in the galaxy far, far away, other than Skywalker, other than Sith, other than Jedi. And this show is about a small fraction of those moving parts in this ginormous galaxy, right? There's still a tie to the original story in that it tells you what's happening with a birth of the rebellion, whatever, which is coming, but I think it's a great show. It's grounded. That's the biggest thing. It's a Star Wars story that has a lot of new moving parts, and I like that a lot. We know at some point we're gonna get some fan service. It's gonna be unfortunate. We're gonna get probably maybe too much. I don't know. But the first 3 episodes have been really good for me. He's a troubled, flawed individual, but he obviously goes down a path of redemption to lead him to where he is in Rogue One with the Resistance. But I mean, we learned that he's a flawed individual who at opening scene for him, right? He's a flawed individual. So, and it carries over for the first 3 episodes. I love it. I think practical effects are brilliant. That's the best part of this whole thing. This is one of those Filoni machines that they're going forward with. Obviously, they really wanted to. They took a lot of the complaints that they had from the new trilogy and maybe from some of the other shows and really said, okay, we're going to take a step back from all of that craziness of that rivalry, and we're going to tell you just a story that takes place within the world. And here's a whole new set of characters. You already know Cassian Andor because of Rogue One, but here's a bevy of new characters. So
Yeah, which
I like it.
Skarsgård is this?
This is Stellan.
Yeah, I
This is
thought
Stellan.
so. I can
The
never
dad.
remember. Yeah,
The dad.
but
Yeah.
his character, is he like an Imperial who's working undercover? Like he's got that kind of air of mystery around him, but he's that kind of you can tell, he's that grizzled veteran who knows
Yeah.
who's on a mission. And I think it's a slow burn kind of show because it is supposed to be more of akin to a spy show.
Yep.
Building out like a spy network and all that kind of stuff and political subterfuge, things like that. So it's going to be slow because that's the type of show it is. You know, and even westerns generally are pretty slow. You know, like Mandalorian is very methodical, right? Like
Yep.
it's not action all the time. And they built towards it, I think, very effectively. The one misstep, I think, was airing them as 3 separate episodes.
Okay.
I think just pacing wise, making you stop the player, go to the next episode. Here's credits. Like, I I think it paced better as a one block piece of content.
So just do 1 3-hour
Because it
opening
was
episode?
direct pickups, was it not?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
In between, yeah, the first 2 episodes.
Sure,
It
yeah.
was first pickups, like right away. So I would have rather it aired unbroken, culminating in that final breakout with it, you know, him escaping, you know, from not quite, they're not the Empire, they're the capitalists who work for the Empire, the
Yeah.
security force. I think it would have helped the pacing a little bit and would have, I think, there were some people like my dad was like, oh, it's too slow. I'm like, just watch it, just keep watch it all back to back to back, and it's great. But he didn't. He did 1,
Okay.
2, then 3. Like he took a
Then
break.
3.
Like
Yeah.
that's why I think it would have been better as a hey, here's an hour and a half, here's an hour 40 minutes, because I think it would have been what, just about an hour and a half for the first 3.
Just about, yeah. I think they were about 40 and change each
But yeah, and
episode.
then you cut off the credits and the intro for each one, so it just goes consistently. I think it'd be about
That's
an hour
true.
and a half,
True.
and I think that would have worked really, really well. And then you go weekly after that for your political subterfuge. But at the same time, you don't want to set the expectation of, hey, here's an hour and a half every week.
Yeah.
You know, so I do understand that. It's just, and I get that's probably that middle ground, which was released all 3 episodes at once. Because clearly the show was, this is like essentially the pilot and him breaking out of this part of his world and getting into the wider, you know, galaxy with the resistance and the rebellion. And he just got to get there. And doing that over 3 weeks would have been really, oh, why are we sitting here for 3 weeks to get to the good part?
Yeah, I will say watching all 3 of those back to back to back, it made sense for me, but I understand what you're saying, like, your dad didn't do that, and it's like, where and then by, 3 weeks from now, he watches that 3rd episode and be like, "Okay, like, why did we really need those first 2?" Is probably what he would think, right? What was the point of the first 2 episodes? Whereas, like you said, if it was one big episode, why not? It flows better. It flows better, especially from start to finish. You don't have those stops, but I don't see a problem with them doing this because Netflix showed that if you tell a reasonable episode, it can be an hour, it could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour and a half, and then you can stack the other episodes to like design. I think the last season of Game of Thrones,
It
there were
varied pretty
episodes
widely.
they're pretty widely in time. I think the big battle one was what, like an hour and 20 minutes, I think it was,
Hmm.
or close to that. So you could do that. I don't think it's a problem. I think people just understand like, hey, I got to invest myself. But I think the if it was one block, like just one intro episode, people would have been like, okay, I need to take a break. How much do I have left? I have 45 minutes. Okay, I'm just going to pause it and come back a little later. That's a different mindset of I got to check out an episode and then start a different episode and then start a different episode. So that makes sense. That does. But I enjoyed it because it was completely different from the a lot of the Star Wars content we've gotten since Disney's taken over the IP.
Hmm. Sorry, I'm just writing notes for our talk on She-Hulk as I think of things to
Yeah,
write down.
sure, man.
But yeah, I'm very excited to see because we didn't even get to see Mon Mothma this episode.
No,
And she's a
we're going
fantastic
to.
character that I'm so glad we're
Yeah.
getting more of because it's a, you know, like that part of the universe, the actual political side of it, never really got delved into too deeply. I mean, it was in the prequel trilogy, but kind of just in the background. Like Padme
Yep.
didn't have much to do, and she had more in the original cut of Revenge of the Sith, as did Mon Mothma, played by the same actress, and her parts were cut.
Yep.
Or was it the same actress?
I
I think it
don't.
is.
It's the same actress. She was in Rogue One.
And is this
I
not the
don't
same
know.
actress? Did they de-age her for this?
Uh,
I can't remember. Like a little bit.
Genevieve O'Reilly. I may be wrong. I may be wrong on that.
I
I may
thought
be
it was
wrong
the
there.
same.
Let me pull
Maybe
that.
I misread the.
Because she was in Rebels. Yep.
Yep, she voiced it in
And
Rebels, which was great.
Rogue One. I don't see her. Oh, that's television. Let's see here.
Yeah, I don't know what's this would be
No. Oh
classified.
yeah, she was in Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, she played
Yeah,
she played Mon
and
Mothma in
and
Revenge.
she was like basically cut out of it. So
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
know if it's her in this show, but that character I'm glad we're gonna get to see more of.
So she basically took over the role from I forget her name from New Hope, right?
Yeah.
I forget her name, the actress that originally played Mon Mothma, but she looks very similar to her.
Mhm.
That's I mean, like I remember watching Rogue One, be like thinking like, oh wow, like she
Yeah, it
looks
was
great.
very well cast.
It was like did they de-age her? And then I go find out like, oh no, it's a whole new actress. Okay, it was like, well, she looked a lot like her, but obviously she's going to be Mon Mothma going forward. It would be great to have her because, like you said, she's always kind of had a background
And she's a
role.
character that could bounce between a number of different shows in this era because she's a public
Mm.
facing senator. But
Yep,
behind the scenes, she's essentially leading the rebellion.
yep,
Like, that's pretty awesome.
yep.
And he's not exactly like you got to worry about de-aging Jimmy Smits all the time or Bail Organa. It's like, man, that was getting pretty.
Yeah, we were getting close there.
It's
Yeah.
getting pretty much like, hey, don't do this anymore.
Yeah, he had to lose a lot of weight for Obi-Wan to
Yeah,
like because he had put on a lot of weight because he's older now. He's like 60, but like you could tell he was starting to age. But I think they told him if you lose a little weight, maybe that'll help the look a little bit. And they just covered him in makeup. He didn't look as much of his age
it wasn't
in
quite as bad
Andor.
as what was that Robert De Niro in The Irishman when he's like
Oh
moving like an
yeah,
80-year-old, but he's supposed to be 20.
yeah.
Wasn't quite that bad, but it was getting close.
Yeah. But, yeah, I hope to see more of her because like you said, she has this dual role within this whole political structure. But the other thing is that she obviously is committed to the role. Let's dig in a little deeper to her in Andor. Maybe she and Cassie and Andor have like a much deeper connection, you know? That's why she trusts him in Rogue One because there's other things that take place when he joins the Resistance.
Hmm. I also wonder if they're going to have any potential crossovers with Rebels. Like, does he meet Hera at some point, or do they pull in a stealth Ahsoka cameo? Because in Rebels, she's Fulcrum, which is like this undercover,
Yep.
like operative who's helping to coordinate all the various different cells of the Resistance. Turns out it's Ahsoka Tano. So, are we going to stealth get her in the show? Wouldn't be impossible.
No, no.
Imagine that's
How
the
wha
season 2 cliffhanger.
what's the gap gonna be between Andor and Rogue One?
I
Is it
think
just a
it's
few
like
years?
2
5
or 3
years?
years.
Okay.
So it's pretty close.
Okay.
And we establish in Rebels that like Hera and Kanan have been like running ops for a while, and they don't. Only Hera knows she's working for the Resistance in the beginning. The
Yeah.
rest of them don't know that. So like, I would love to see that. Like, maybe we see the Ghost, which is a pretty dope ship, like that kind
Yep.
of thing. I would love to like not canonize, but like bring it all the way into live action because you see it in Rise of Skywalker, but honestly, that movie sucks. So bring it into this show, which would fit canonically. I think that'd be pretty cool.
I
Plus,
like how
they got a
you
cool droid. Chopper's cool.
I like how you're going on all in on this after you saw Cad Bane, live action Cad Bane. You're
Fuck
like, "Give
yeah!
me more." You're like, "Give me more.
Give me
Give
all
me
the
more."
Filoni shit in live action. Let's go.
Let's go.
Speaking of Star Wars stuff, though, do we
Yeah,
want to spin into the other question, the moral one? The what do we think about this question?
go for it, man. I wanna hear your
So
question.
my thought is, my question is in regards to the James Earl Jones licensing his voice via AI for the voice
Sure.
of Darth Vader, which I believe you and I both called. Obviously, it wasn't
Yep.
super hard, but during Obi-Wan, we're like, that sounds amazing. Like that sounds
Compared to Rogue
so much
One,
better than
yes.
Rogue One or anything else he's done. Since probably, I think he did an episode of Rebels where it still sounded pretty good, but that was a
Mhm.
number of years ago now.
Yeah.
So it was pretty obvious they had been doing some work because we knew they did on Mandalorian with Mark Hamill with the deep fake. So we kind of figured some technology was at play. Turns out it was a Ukrainian startup that's been doing a lot of AI voice modulation and voice creation via licensed work. And they've done pretty good.
Yeah.
So my question is, number one, where do you come down on? Is that something that you think the industry should dive into more? Does it matter that it's licensed by the still living person or their legal estate? Like, does that matter? And if that, if it's something we're going to continue to do, which I think we will, what are some of your go-tos? Like, that needs to also, like, I would hope that person also licenses their voice, or I just want to keep hearing it. For me, the best example for that is Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, Batman Joker. But while you vamp and give me your answer, I do have to quick go to the restroom, but I do have one counter to play devil's advocate to myself.
Okay.
What about that does that take away roles from people in the future?
Okay, it's a good question.
That is
It's
a
a good
very good
question.
question. And we'll
So for
answer that,
me,
or and I will hear. I want to hear Fusion's answer
okay.
when I get back. So I'm
So you
back.
want my answer. Okay. I always have to be careful of myself teetering on being too nostalgic versus creating good dynamic content. With that said though, I always feel that if you're going to tell the story, tell it right. And that means if you have things that work for you, like a quintessential voice for Darth Vader being obviously James Earl Jones. Let's be real. It's been what 40 some odd years, right? 45 years. And that is the quintessential Vader voice. Um I really don't have a problem in that regard because it's the likeness is his voice. It's less about his image likeness. Um I would hope that, and I don't know about this, maybe you can expand on it, but I do hope that the studio really went in and worked with him on some type of future contract, because what that means is that his family, his estate, can continue to receive income based off of that. Because that's really a big, it's almost like a trademark in a way, if that makes sense. Like Michael Buffer trademarking "Let's get ready to rumble," even though it's just a common phrase to say in sports, he was able to link it to him, his look, and his voice. And now, anytime someone says it, they have to pay him for that, right? I almost think that we kind of are leaning towards that kind of, okay, well, maybe they can trademark their voice as a particular character, but then again, it would kind of suck. It would suck for 100 years, 60 to 100 years down the road when they try
Yeah,
to reboot IPs. It's like, what the hell are we going to do? Like we have to, or the technology no longer fits what we have now, and so what they used back then, the sound isn't the same. So plus, it's just like we just have to refresh the whole IP. It's been dead for 30 years. Let's just restart it all over again. Well, let's start fresh again. So those are it's a very interesting and tough thing to say, but I'm leaning more towards I don't have a problem with it just because like I said, it's a quintessential character in this universe that you want to tell a shit ton of more stories about, both in the past of this saga. Then we should be able to have the AI run his voice and be able to generate a very pretty close to the exact copy of his voice, and in return his estate still gets money off of it when he's gone. He's 91 years old now, and like I said, we both said this before, in Rogue One we could tell that his voice wasn't the same. He sounded really slurry, and it sounded pretty bad in Rogue One. And I think they wanted to do him justice as well. For all we know, he probably noticed it and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I listened to myself in Rogue One and I was embarrassed, and they were like, let's use technology to help with that. And they did, and he's like, hell yeah, let's do this. It makes me feel like I'm a part of things again. We don't know. There's so many different ways to look at this, man. But I would say for me, I'm okay with it for now, as long as like the studio is letting him and his estate and
yeah.
him and his any future estate still have take part in like the credit for that.
And
Even
I'm
if they,
sure
yeah,
the unions will have something to say on it too, in terms of like what can it be, how will those licenses work,
sure,
like what will the rates be for that kind of
sure,
thing. Because I imagine, like another situation would be like, what about Tim Curry? He had his extremely severe stroke. He's never going to perform again,
sure,
but he's got a lot out there performance wise that they could generate an AI voice with this kind of technology. Clearly, it's become a thing. And he can, like, it's gotten to the point where they can use this kind of technology just for personal use,
yeah,
load it up on a laptop and put it, if you're in a wheelchair, you can have a voice again, assuming you're still able to control said laptop and said, technology, but
hmm
which is, of course, a pretty small niche in terms of those kind of traumatic injuries. But at the same time, I do wonder if, like, I mean, obviously there's a use for that there. Like, he's still living.
yeah,
His estate will continue, past his death because he's done so many iconic roles.
that's
So,
right.
is there, how will that work licensing wise? Like, what is ethical? What is also legal? Like how all that's going to turn out. Because that on the flip side, look at, I mentioned Kevin Conroy's Batman. They've also had a ton of different Batman, which
Sure.
I really appreciate because they could have just gone to the well and gone Kevin Conroy for 30 years. They didn't. They got Bruce Greenwood. Jensen Ackles done it a couple of times, or once, and then like they've had, I think Mark Harmon did it once, right? Like
Mark Harmon did it.
Jason, the guy who was He was in Agents of Shield. He was Patriot. Like the the new director in season 4, 5.
Oh, I don't
Oh, it's
remember.
oh my god, it's on the tip of my tongue. He was in the New 52 for universe. He was Batman in like 9, 10 films.
And Diedrich Bader is
Yeah,
doing
Dietrich Bader, right?
a long run. What's his name? Will Arnett,
Yeah,
obviously
Will
another
Arnett did it in
one.
Lego Batman. Like they've had lots of different versions of the character, so it's not just specific. But like there would be a use case for like, hey, you're doing a DCAU style, movie like with animation. Well, hey, here's the license to Kevin Conroy as Batman. Give it whatever you want for dialogue, and you pay Kevin Conroy and his estate. I think that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool. It would give
Now,
creators the option. You don't have to use it, but it's the option.
well, I think studios, and the dangerous thing that we both know is the studios will try to save
Exactly.
money
That's
wherever they
that's where the
can.
union's gonna have to be like, hey, this ain't gonna
Yeah.
be cheap.
Nope. And it shouldn't be. It should be the same value. Like they have, and of course, the courts would have to get involved at some point to determine what that value is for the estate for the likeness, right? Like they're no longer paying for that living person's voice
Yeah. Is it
or
gonna
their
be the
image.
equivalent of a actor in the studio pay?
Mhm. But then again, it's like, but if you create a
And what if it's
major
Robert Downey
motion,
Jr.? Like, does that
yeah,
mean it's worth more?
exactly.
Is
Like
the other gonna be escalators?
yeah,
I don't know. That's gonna be
because
very,
RJ,
very interesting.
because RDJ, he could still voice Tony Stark in an animated version of the universe, right? And you know,
Yeah.
we've talked about this just because is it opening a Pandora's box? I'm not going to say yet because we still haven't crossed that line, but it's a good question to ask because obviously the big one is, like I said, the quintessential Darth Vader voice is James Earl Jones. Now they've had other people voice and no one's really cared, honestly. Like in Force Unleashed, people were like, okay, but whenever James Earl Jones came back to voice Vader, everyone was like, that's what I was looking for. It's the same. It's Vader, right? And what we listened to in Obi-Wan, it's like, holy shit, like they did something to help because he sounds so much better. Maybe like we both said, maybe it's technology. Like you said, it's
Yeah, because they
obviously
didn't really say.
no, they didn't say.
They danced around
Um,
it for a bit.
well, what led us to that was the whole conversation about the audio dubbing with the Star Wars prequels. Remember we were talking
Yeah.
about that,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
led us to that conversation about how something obviously is going on with his voice in versus Rogue One because we both immediately noticed the difference in like much stronger, much fluid voice this time. Um, it's probably one of those things that just needs to happen where we see where it goes. For me, I'm okay with it as long as we get to a point where if we're talking about bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars for a production, the estate of that person, if they're no longer around, because if it's 20, 30, 40 years down the road and it's used, that estate gets the actual value rather than just, oh, we're going to give them, a voiceover work, rate, and that's it. We're done with it. I don't want to see that because you're taking technology and taking someone's legacy and using it. But the other thing, man, is what worries me is at some point the general public's going to get a hold of this on the internet, this technology, and you're going to have, you're going to have, you're going to have like,
Well, we
uh,
already do kind of have,
celebrities celebrities call you. Well, where it started is Ghostface Killer. Like there is like people were using a version of that to use his voice on like streaming games, things like that, like role playing games, and making phone calls. So
we've had the
I wouldn't be
technology for a
shocked.
bit because like didn't Baldwin do one of the Baldwins, didn't he do an encyclopedia or something? Like he just read it and then they had his voice. It was the University of Georgia or something like that. That
I
sticks
think
in
you're
my brain.
I think you're watching you. There was an episode of 30 Rock about that where Alec Baldwin did sell his
It's
voice.
just here.
It's not. It didn't really
Somebody
happen.
did
It was a.
that though.
Did they? Okay,
Like,
maybe,
I'm
but
pretty sure no,
that
that's what they were lampooning was that
okay.
somebody did that.
Okay,
Like
but
they've been
it
working
was an
on
episode of the.
similar technologies for a while. And so like it's not like super far fetched because like you need a lot of source material to make it work effectively. Like to make
Yeah,
it be true to life. You need a
yeah,
lot behind it. At least for now, who knows? Like who knows where the technology goes in 20 years, but yeah, it'll be an interesting threshold and like not quite litmus test for how technology is going to impact, you know, studios and like for instance like deepfakes and stuff, like what they did with Harold Ramis, right? Like and his estate for Afterlife. Like Hollywood's slowly starting to reconcile with that in terms of how do you do it ethically versus what's legal? Because there's a lot more that's legal than ethical.
yeah.
So like, how do you find that line and then go there creatively and do it right? And this is another area that's a new frontier that they're going to have to deal with as major characters and major actors and their original characters are no longer, or at least would not have been an option otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it because if the algorithm was solid enough, Jessica Walter's character on Archer could still be around for another season, right? They could
Yeah.
wrap it up, things like that. It's like we didn't get close, like someone passes away before we're able to close out our show or finish telling our
Yeah, or
story,
like they
right?
said, the Tim Curry, like you have a massive stroke that you will never recover from.
Yeah,
Like, and but you still like you would still be able to use those licenses to fund your care and take care of yourself and your family. Like,
yeah,
there's a definite use case for there that I can see, you know, kind of like ethically and creatively that they
yeah.
can make it work. It's just I'm curious how it will work out between studios and the unions and the various different actors guilds that there are. So that
Yeah.
will be an interesting thing to follow.
Sure. Good question to ask, man.
All right, so let's move on. Speaking of lawyer stuff, how about we talk about a lawyer show?
Let's do this.
Segues, am I right? God,
Right into it.
I love when I build shit like that. All right, so it's time to talk She-Hulk Attorney at Law. So we are now 6 episodes in
That's right.
of a total of 9, so 3 left. How you feeling? You got any Daredevil blue balls?
Man, I loved what they did.
That looks pretty great though. I won't lie.
It
The
wasn't
balls
a
to do
deep
that is
it wasn't a
awesome.
deep fake. It wasn't a deep fake, but it was another one of those they're doing it to fuck with those that internet group of collective, like the Andrew Tate guys of the his fans. They're out there to piss them off. That's what they're doing. That's what they knew, which is great, Thomas, because they knew well before they produced the show they were going to get this type of hate.
Oh yeah.
And they prepared themselves from the very beginning that this was the kind of the wasn't going to be the main reception, but they were going to get a lot of people that were going to shit on this show because obviously it's written by women and they wrote Fleabag, and so they get that kind of like the culture that we're in, the environment that we're in. It's like women are still going to get picked at by a large section of hateful men, so we're going to push forward. That was awesome, man. We get the helmet in one episode. The next episode is, all right, guys, I know you're excited, but this is a wedding episode. Like, oh, that's pretty ballsy, man.
I certainly appreciated it. And it was a fun episode anyway.
Yeah, it was. It
You know?
was.
It doesn't have not like again, it's not major fighting demons episode all the time. It's not that kind of show. It's a lawyer show. Like they say it in the first episode, lawyer show. Like
Hmm.
that's what it is. And she's also a potential burgeoning superhero. Like she's getting down that road, which has been really fun to watch. And I can't wait to see the episode where she finally debuts the super suit and actually starts fighting crime, which is when Daredevil's going to show up.
But we still get an introduction of a Marvel character in this
Yeah,
episode.
they didn't like they just drop it in there like, hey, here's Mr. Immortal.
He's Mr. Immortal.
Fuck, what? Like it's
And
crazy.
you're thinking like maybe he's just calling himself that. Then he jumps out the window. You're like, oh shit, he is Mr. Immortal. Okay. Here's the other thing. Did you catch the little Easter egg that could potentially connect this episode to Blade in the MCU?
No.
When he's mentioning the women that he was married to, he mentioned that he was married at one point to a woman that called herself the Baroness Lily Cromwell. Does that ring a bell?
No. Is
Okay.
that Blade's mom or
No,
ancestor?
no. In the Blade universe, in the Blade universe, Dracula has kind of like his number two guy. It's the Baron Blood. She's his wife, the Baroness Blood. That's who Lily Cromwell is
Oh,
in the Blade comic world. So I caught that and I was like, oh, that's a little interesting. All right, I like how, and just like the episode before with the fashion episode, the Easter eggs at the very end with all the tennis shoes. You see the Cyclops tennis shoe, the Cable,
yeah, and
the
we had the
Nebula.
X-Men, man fights with metal claws in bar, like
Yeah.
crazy shit like that.
So what I like one is that there it sounds like they're gonna go with X, like you mentioned this to me, a sidebar that at some point the X-Men exist in this world. We just don't know about them, which is cool. I like that,
Yeah, they've managed to
how
stay hidden.
Yep, they managed to stay hidden, so something's going to bring them out, and which is cool. I like that idea, and we could retroactively do a film that takes place in the year 2000, 20 years ago, where the X-Men are formed, or something like that, right? They're kids, and then we flash forward to where they're in their 30s now, right? That's cool. I like that idea. I'm okay with that, rather than let's go slingshot way back Matthew Vaughn style and create a weird timeline. Let's go 60s,
Yeah, it was
70s,
very
80s.
weird. Fun, but weird.
It's fun, but it's weird because you have the
And then
60s, the
again, it's
70s, and
also
80s,
very
and
comic
90s.
booky. Hey, it doesn't make sense. Just fucking throw that shit out the window. Here we go.
Yep.
Like, that's
60s,
comic
70s,
books.
80s. We're going through 4 decades and nobody ages.
Yeah. Oops.
Like what are we doing here? Like, okay, so shouldn't McAvoy and Fassbender be like in their 60s now in
Yeah,
the
why didn't you
90s?
just bring back Stewart and, like right then and
Yeah,
there? Like, it was weird.
yeah.
It was bizarre. Not a fan. In
And then
terms
Days
of
of
the
Future Past,
logically.
yeah. And then Days of Future Past takes place in the 2010s. It's kind of in the middle of the 2010s. And then they're their correct ages, so it's like, okay, that makes sense. But then,
Yeah, it
okay,
was
yeah, and the Havoc and the
what they
Havoc
should have done.
Cyclops.
Oh my god. They should have in the middle there. Hey, here's a slightly aged up Tom Hardy because he was young Patrick Stewart already. Like he's done that
Yeah,
before. Like that would have
yep.
been great.
That would have been cool. That would have been cool. Um, but anyway, but like apparently we're getting all these little Easter eggs. Fun show. I have no problem with it. People are complaining about how illogical it is, guys. It's a fucking superhero show. We're not going to talk about the Little Mermaid thing, which took place while we've been out. Since
Oh jeez,
the
what
time
a
we've been
just
gone. It's
not
just,
even worth it.
guys.
Just stop being idiots.
It's fantasy. It's fantasy. All of it is fantasy. None of it is real. Just enjoy it. If you don't
Like,
enjoy it,
I'm sorry to I don't want to burst any bubbles, but mermaids aren't fucking real.
yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
saw that
neither
Twitter
are.
thread with the guy was like, but it's a real fictional character. I'm like, no, fictional's in the sentence you typed, you dumb fuck.
Well, it's the same thing with the show. It's a fictional character. Like, I can't believe she would be a lawyer. This is all goofy. It's like, yeah, at some point, like all the craziness that would happen with the superheroes in a world, people would just start being like, all right, dude, whatever. So we would have Madisons like that are just like, all right, like I go into an alternate universe and I
And I'm
have
gonna
to
watch The Sopranos with Wong, like,
uh,
which is so good.
oh, that episode was still the best, man. The Wongers thing, fucking
Oh,
cool.
so good. I really do hope
And
she shows up in Doctor Strange 3. That would be
well,
amazing.
the theory is she went to the alternate. She went to the underworld, and she had to sign a deal with Mephisto because everybody's still fucking fascinated with Mephisto. I know everybody wants Mephisto, but they're thinking maybe that's who she signed the contract with for her soul, which would be kind of funny. But obviously, that's a story that's going to have to come back at some point, right? She sold her soul, right? So someone's going to have to get involved with that. But Wong was hilarious on the show. We get I thought the Abomination arc was going to be a little
I
longer.
don't
I
think they're
didn't realize
done
it was.
because
You
these
don't
in the
think?
promos. There's a therapy session,
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right.
right?
That's
Like
right.
that's coming yet too. So that'll be there for sure because there's a
And
lot we haven't
obviously,
seen yet, and we haven't seen the Daredevil stuff.
we haven't seen the Daredevil stuff. We haven't seen Frogman. We were told we're gonna get Frogman, as well as we got to tie up the loose end with Bruce. Like what happened? What's going
Yeah,
on
I
with
think
that?
that's cliffhanger. At this point, I don't know if it's going to be full finale. I think it's cliffhanger for if there's ever going to be a season 2 and or a actual Hulk movie.
Yeah. Well, I like the show. It's a breath of fresh air. It's well written. I think Tatiana has been great as the character. Like just her level of just like confidence. And I will say this: her the support she's getting from like Mark Ruffalo and other folks on the cast and just other folks in the Marvel world, like even Chris Evans has stepped up and said stuff like they've been real supportive in the face of like all of the criticism from those guys, those hateful guys out there. When it's just like, hey guys, like it's all fiction and it's all art. If you don't, no one's telling you you have to watch every single MCU product. We get it. If it's not your wheelhouse, you don't have to watch it. It's
Yeah.
really it. That's really it. Like we want to make something for everyone. Just like with Miss Marvel, it was like in the Pakistani community, they're like, hey, we get representation now in Marvel in the MCU. The Black Panther. A lot of kids were loving the fact that they had a hero to look up to, man. I get it. I really do. I get it, and I'm you know my mindset. It doesn't like I have no real stance on that as long as you're telling me a good story. Just
Hmm.
keep telling me a good story. And this has been very different. This run of She-Hulk's been very different from the other MCUs. but it's very spot on to the Dan Slott comic books. Really dead, like right on the money with them. And I'm hoping that we get at least get a second season. I know some of these shows have been filming second seasons. Like Moon Knight has started pre-production recently. They wrapped on Loki season 2. And then there's still talk if they're going to do Miss Marvel season 2 because they're still wrapping up the Marvels. But I think we get a season 2 out of that one probably. But I think this deserves maybe one or maybe even three
I could
seasons out
actually
of
see
it.
them turning it from She-Hulk into a full-on Hulk show.
Okay.
Because of course we have the theory, the dangling thread I want to get to with the blood. We
Okay.
know the leader's
Okay.
coming back in Captain America 4 New World Order.
Yep.
I thought they were going to do a swerve and it wasn't going to be the leader. It was going to be, somebody trying to become Red Hulk. Maybe that's not the case though.
Okay.
Because when I thought this with the blood stuff, we didn't know for sure leader was back yet.
Yeah.
That was not confirmed. And the fact that that got out publicly almost makes me think they're going to go there. But then again, I still want to come back to that. They're trying to set up Red Hulk at some point. Someone is out there trying to get Hulk's blood to become a government controlled Hulk. And maybe it'll
Well,
fail, which is why they want Abomination and Thunderbolts. But I think the character we're not going to know anything about. There's going to be no marketing for this character, at least until the really close run up. I don't
okay.
think we're going to know Red Hulks in Thunderbolts.
No, obviously not. Like the lineup got a big
I think they're going to
sigh
hide
of
that Red Hulk bit, and
yeah,
maybe they know that like they have the marketing machine ready for it because they're going to set it up in this show. They
yeah.
just haven't got there yet.
I mean, you look at the lineup, and it's not a bad lineup, but it's a lineup where people were like, "Really? That's
Yeah,
Bucky?"
and two of the people you're like, oh, they're going to bounce super early because they're going to be like this fucked up, and that's
Yep.
Bucky and the new Black Widow. They're both going
Yep.
to be like, no, thank you, we're good.
So then they're gonna have to bring in Baron Zemo, obviously, because
Exactly,
he's the big figure of the comic book. But Red Hulk becomes a big character in the later Thunderbolt series. So
exactly.
um
I
it's
still I
important.
still want to be like, hey, Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell as Red Hulk would be pretty fun. And
So
instead of
he comes back as
the angry brute, it's just the trying to be funny misogynist Red Hulk who could kick your ass.
okay, so is he going to play Thunderbolt Ross?
I don't think so. I think he's going to be Justin
Um,
Hammer. I think they're
okay.
just going to slot his character
Okay,
that
so
way.
Justin Hammer turns into a Sam Rockwell Red Hulk.
So you still get Sam Rockwell and you get Red
Okay.
Hulk.
Okay.
I mean, you could make worse decisions, Marvel,
Okay.
because you can't have William Hurt if you're not going to recast Thunderbolt Ross, which they have not said one way or the other. Of
Yeah.
course, William Hurt was the character, and was it a heart attack he had?
I believe he had a failing heart. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was some kind of cardiovascular issue.
Heart disease. Yeah, he's had heart disease. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if you recast the role. If you do, okay, then there's your Red Hulk. But if you don't, and you kind of work with what you have in the toolbox, the options on the table for me are, I think that's a really good one.
What about a Sam Rockwell, like a
Because then,
Justin
like,
Hammer Red Hulk?
their Red Hulk is almost as smart as Smart Hulk. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, he can be their
Yeah.
armorer and their tinkerer, but he's also the brute,
So
kind of like Hulk is now.
what if he could like what if he requires like he could turn to Red Hulk, but he can only be in Hulk form for so long.
Exactly. He's not
Like a
stuck like Bruce.
yeah. But he can't necessarily his goal is to try to be able to change back and forth like Jen Walters can, but he finds out he can only do it, but he can only be it for so long, and then he automatically changes back
Which
to
she
his
does too,
normal
because
form.
when she sleeps, she changes back.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
now, of course, there's the
And
comic
we,
book run where
and what we learned this episode when she's drunk, it's a lot harder for her to change too.
exactly.
So, but we learned also as soon as she changes over, her metabolism kicks in and she's
Yep,
sober again.
and she's totally fine.
Yeah.
Which was a fun
Um.
little bit, and of course the DJ fight with Titania. That's fantastic. That their
Yeah, man.
their their rivalry, like quote unquote, is very in keeping with the comics. And was it Jamil?
I think so.
As Titania, fantastic. She's obviously comes across as someone who is that arrogant, but isn't like inherently that unlikable. So I'm curious to see where they go with her. Because in the comics, don't they have more of a frenemy relationship, as they go
Yeah.
along?
Yep.
So I could see that, coming along. Like, depends on what all kicks off. Oh, Rhoda did something. Oh, Rhoda, I don't have those on this scene. Sorry, we're live. I don't have my sound alerts on the recording because I don't want it on the recording, Rhoda. Sorry. Oh, excuse me. So, anything
So,
else we want to talk about with
yeah,
She-Hulk?
real quick, my question to you: are we establishing that Daredevil is not the Netflix
Well, they've
Daredevil at
already said
all?
that.
They've said it, but then they also said that
I
Andrew
think they're wanting
Garfield
to
wasn't in
allude.
Spider-Man.
They're wanting to allude. Hey, some of the things happened. Probably not how you remember it. Probably not with all the same characters, but the relationships, how they feel, like how they communicate to each other, how they bounce off each other. That's the same. They
Okay.
want to take that vibe and the core of that show without the full factual, like this is exactly what happened in this order, and they want to move that into the MCU, which I'm
So
fine with.
they're basically saying that the Netflix was a different universe, but it was somewhat similar to the
Exactly.
Daredevil in
Yeah.
this universe.
It's pretty
The
close.
only the only thing is you have to ask what happened with this universe's Kingpin. Was he in prison or was he not? Like that's kind of a obviously Born Again's going to tell you kind of what happened in that
Yeah,
regard. But
I'm sure we'll have some breakdowns from Marvel,
yeah,
probably specifically too, as
yeah,
time goes on, because that's not something they can really shy that much away from, because it was very high profile and very successful.
yep,
That original run. So I'm sure they'll have some kind of like, hey, these are the differences, because the timeline's different and they're all older now too. So you're
yep.
gonna have to bake that into what you do.
It's going to make it harder to bring in Jessica Jones and Luke Cage though if they decide to do it, just because they're powered beings, so they would have to technically be on this universe's registry, right?
Is that still a thing though?
Oh wait, no, it got destroyed after.
Didn't they say
uh
after the blip they're probably just like, who fucking gives a shit? They
Yeah,
saved the
I think
universe.
I don't know if it was No Way Home, the edition we watched, the Super Happy Fun or whatever we watched. They mentioned there was, I think it was there
They
or in
repealed the
Doctor Strange,
Sokovia
that
Accords.
the Soviet, there was like just a quick just handoff, like, hey, yeah, it's no longer a thing because of blah 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 blah. I'm like, okay, all right, so that's done and over with. All right, so you're right, you're right.
Just as long as they
No, that's
don't,
really
just as long as they don't adapt Civil War 2. Please, for the love of God,
oh
do
god,
not
that
turn
was
Brie Larson into that character. Oh my
oh
God.
people already hate
I think
her.
she'd quit.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Like
Yeah,
that character sucks in that run.
yeah.
Oh my God, she's the
Yeah,
worst.
Civil War 2 was a really, really bad story. Really bad story. Yeah.
But I do love how they lampshaded it with they have their Tony Stark like, you're making me the voice of reason. Are you insane? Like that was great. Like you're
Yeah.
that far off the reservation. Tony Stark makes sense. Oof. Yikes. Because Tony in the comics is on a whole other level than he was in the MCU.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Anything
you
else?
put yeah.
Anything
No,
else
that's it.
MCU
That's
wise?
no, that's it, man. That was really it. Really, I'm really enjoying She-Hulk. I really am.
I agree. It's been fantastic. I can't wait for Thursday. But let's get at a couple other things. You, of course, let's real quick. Your thoughts on Rings of Power?
It's not a bad show, but I'm just having a trouble with the pacing. I think the big thing here is we're still trying to figure out who the stranger is, and there's so many. I think we're setting. I think all of the clues that are leading you to think it is Sauron. I think it's a misdirection, man. I really think it's a misdirect. Um, I think it's probably going to end up being Gandalf, even though it blows the whole story because we're in the second age, and the three wizards don't get here till the beginning of the third age. But that's it's got to be either one of those three guys or Sauron, right? I just think that they're
Well,
dropping
then
too many
again, we're
hints right
not
now.
that far from the beginning of the Third Age.
Yeah, like okay, so
If
where?
Isildur's on the board
Yeah, that's
as
true.
an adult,
Yep.
like we're pretty damn close to the end of the Second Age,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because isn't the
Yep.
start of the Third Age when Sauron like dies when they cut the ring off?
When they
That's
cut
essentially the start of the
the
Third
beginning,
Age.
yeah, the beginning of the third age. So basically, we're saying that the wizards got here right before the battle for Earth took place. Middle Earth took place, and Isildur uh, took the ring from Sauron. So they've only been they were only on Earth, Middle Earth for a short time then,
Yeah, and then they continued their presence after to
which
kind of
is like
like help heal
1,000
the
years.
world.
Yeah, a
So like,
thousand
yeah, I
years.
mean,
So
timeline wise, it's not that big of a stretch.
okay, okay,
And if I remember reading right, some of the couple of the guys that work on this were on Lost.
Yeah.
So the misdirects aren't entirely unfamiliar, but also at the same time, it's Lord of the Rings, guys. It's not meant to be a who's who.
Yeah.
It's good versus evil. Like that's Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings.
Yeah.
It is. There's no allegory. It is good, bad, bad guys lose.
So you
It's
think the
that kind of
stranger
story.
is just a character, and it's
I
an
think I if he's not
isolated
Gandalf,
creature.
he's probably. I think the guy in white might be Saruman or Saruman.
So Saruman, yeah.
I don't think like the dark, ominous music was make. Is he Sauron? I think he's Saruman. And then because, but didn't Gandalf was supposed to come first
Yes.
in the
Yes.
lore? Gandalf was supposed to come first, but he was like, I don't.
I don't wanna go. Yeah.
And then they chose Saruman, and he became Saruman the White, and then Gandalf was Gandalf the Gray until he
Gray.
assumed the mantle because he's supposed to be the most powerful. He's just not
Mhm.
like he doesn't want that power, so he doesn't
Yep.
use it all. So this could be Gandalf. I mean, all the signs point that with the stranger because like they will become the hobbits very clearly. These are going to be the
Yep.
hobbits, right? Like
Yep.
so. And then I think the guy in the white's Sauron, and I don't think we've even seen Sauron yet.
No.
I
But
don't I don't think we see him until the very end.
but, like, with the Firefly scene, they're kinda leading you to believe that the stranger could possibly be Sauron, right? I think what's gonna happen is we'll probably end up at the end of this season where it's revealed that the stranger is Gandalf by the, arrival of Radagast. Like, he shows up, and he tells him who he is, you know? That's probably
Yeah,
what's gonna happen. And then you're like, "Oh, shit, it is Gandalf, cool." It makes sense, though, because he's the bonding with the with the Harfoots, you know, it's like, it makes sense, right?
because like
So,
at this
I
point we've gotten to know him like enough. Like the bond is there. I'm like, okay, if that is Sauron, why the fuck would he murder them? Because he's gonna have to kill
yeah.
them if he's Sauron, right?
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
that's not a thing that they're gonna do in a Lord of the Rings universe. And if they do that, it's not Lord of the Rings anymore. Like that's just not the kind of show and movie, the product, the IP. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
And if they
Just like
do that, I'm done. Like I'm not gonna watch season 2 because they very clearly don't get Lord of the Rings if that's what they do.
yeah.
They're trying to keep
I
it interesting week to week, so they're giving us those misdirects, but I think it's gonna end up being rather paint by numbers isn't the right word because that's got a connotation to it, but
yeah.
it's very much hindsight. You're gonna be, oh yeah, that's we called it right away because Lord of the Rings is very like what you see is what you get. Like, you have your archetypes. It's very much that to a T because that's how it was made as an entity, like as an IP. So, like, I don't think we're going to be really that shocked. The only thing is, I'm not 100% sure on if Halbrand is Sauron or not. That one I don't know.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
they're setting it up to be him actually. And like
Okay.
maybe after the war with Morgoth, he just decided to fuck off and I don't want anything to do with anyone.
Yeah.
And then he's gonna and then but then that kind of monkey's paw, like not monkey's paw, but that kind of like meeting with the hero in Galadriel, she's the one who's like, hey, be yourself, and like, oh, that turns out she was telling Sauron to be Sauron, like that's what's probably more likely.
And she goes into exile in the woods or something because of
Or
what happened.
they end up fighting in Mordor, but they lose.
Yeah.
And then he ends up going back with her and working for Celebrimbor at the end of season 2, and we get the reveal at the end. We're like close up on his face, and you like see the ears or something, and he's definitely not human. Like,
Yeah.
there you go.
Okay.
That's
I
where I think they end up.
it's not like I said, it's not a bad show. I do have a problem with the pacing. I will say the last couple episodes seeing more of Durin and
Yeah, they're the
Elrond. I
best
like
pairs
that.
in the show, and it is
I
not close.
no, the relationship they
That's
have is
young Ned
great.
Stark, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
It's great.
Crazy. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, don't
It's
give him
just
a mane
crazy,
of
like
hair. He doesn't look like he's got a squished
it
face.
was exactly, exactly. He looks very different than Hugo Weaving as Elrond, but he's also
Way younger.
supposed to be yeah, way younger. But it's a different like, and they tell you in the synopsis of the Rings of Power that he goes on this journey to he becomes a completely different person. Like, you know, his whole mentality shifts through this saga. You know, he ends up becoming the Elrond we learned, we know of in the original books. So, but overall, it's not a bad show. I will continue to say, one, the cinematography is beautiful. Two, the music is fantastic. I am hoping that it does pick up the pace a little bit, but I I will say, like, it's not like it's okay to be. And I know people are stacking because they're airing at the same time. This and House of Dragons, they're you and I both know they're just completely different stories.
Yeah, it's
Completely
it's
different
it's
stories.
fantasy, but extremely different types of fantasy.
Yeah,
It's like saying
exactly.
Star Trek versus The Expanse.
Yeah,
One is sci-fi, like fiction. One is hard sci-fi,
yeah. One
right?
takes the teachings of Joseph Campbell. One's just evil versus evil on another level. It's just yeah.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
get it.
Like
But
it's just different types of storytelling. But
yep.
moving on, House of
Yes,
the
go.
Dragon. You said you got caught up this weekend. What do you
Yep.
think of that?
I love it. I did find it interesting jumping into like Olivia Cook and I forget her name that plays Emma Darcy playing Rhaenyra. Am I getting it
Renera.
right? Rhaenyra. That 10-year jump was a little awkward, but like man, going from the first 5 episodes into episode 6, it was like, whoa, shit. Like there was a lot that just takes place at the beginning of the episode. But I like it, man. And I'm gonna say this. Obviously, and I've read the books quasi in that I've read the books like lightly. I didn't like really go in, take notes, things like that to understand a lot of the heavy background lore
Like
of what
you didn't
happens
pull
in.
a James.
No, I did not pull a James of what happens in Westeros, but I will say this. Obviously, we now see that the like Robert Baratheon's reign over Westeros obviously meant that he changed the history a little bit because throughout the Game of Thrones series, you kind of get the feeling that the Targaryens were a bunch of arrogant assholes. Where this show shows them as more flawed characters, like that are just struggling to get through so much of the world around them, and they're not as arrogant. They're not as I'm not gonna say strong, but I think they're kind of in a really bad point in their history of ruling Westeros and King's Landing. So. Matt Smith as Damon, love him. Great casting call, man. Overall, the cast is brilliant. I like the pacing of this one in that it is slower than Game of Thrones, but there's still a lot going on, but there's not too much like
Yeah,
Game
we're
of Thrones.
just about to kick off
Yeah,
everything that goes down in the Dance of the Dragons, which
yeah,
is
the Dance of the Dragons. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
correct.
just like it took them a little bit because you have to lay that groundwork, like, and especially as for the tragic arcs, like friendships breaking and stuff, all that in a Civil War, you got to lay that groundwork. So the 5 episodes where we get to know the characters when they're young, when they're when they're their like best selves, and then everything kicks off around them, and they get kind of broken by the world that they're in. I
Mhm.
really like the time jump, and they did say there's no more time jumps. It's going to be all basically sequential from here on out
Okay,
in terms of when things happen. But man, I'm really liking the show. I even got a wood burning planned if I have time for
nice.
extra life, doing the House of Dragon symbol, the House Targaryen and the Fire and Blood, their house words. And then I might end up next spring doing a Stark one for the winter is coming, which fucking love that. The direwolf's such a great symbol too.
I mean, because it's mentioned the
Oh,
connection
I
that
was gonna
the
mention
Targaryens. Go ahead.
29.5 million
Yes,
per week.
per week.
I looked up. Do you know what the last season of Game of Thrones got on average?
I'm gonna say 8.5 million.
10.
10. Okay. So this is
Almost triple.
triple.
That
Crazy.
is otherworldly level of growth popularity. Like everyone like, oh man, it left such a bad taste in people's mouth. Well, clearly not. This show's doing gangbusters. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Makes you wonder how fast HBO is going to fast track that Jon Snow
Oh, it's
story, right?
coming like that. But then again, sounds like Warner's trying to sell everything to get sold to Comcast. You see that? All that rumors?
I haven't
Because
seen
when a
that
bunch
rumor,
of their
man.
debt stuff unwinds in 2024, they can get sold again. And bam, who's sitting there that has money and has a hole in their like strategy? Comcast.
Oh my lord, I did not see this, man. Oh,
They're the
you're
only
kind of
big
you're
player that doesn't have a thing in the streaming content
yeah.
creation space, and they happen to be the biggest. Like
Comcast Universal, man. Oh gosh.
that's gonna be
So does Peacock get shut down
that's what they're
and
saying.
everything?
They're gonna merge it with like they have Peacock, but like
Yeah.
Peacock never took off.
Yeah.
They have the IP, they just don't have the technology, they don't have the they're not getting it like HBO did.
No.
No, HBO stumbled with HBO Max and then really came on strong. They want that.
Well, what happened was they had Go.
And then
Remember
when
that whole?
everything, yeah, it was very weird.
There was one point it was HBO Now,
Yeah, HBO Now.
HBO Go, and HBO Max were all for like a very short window. All three platforms were active, and then they were like, you know what? We're just gonna move it over here. You know what? We're just gonna move our team to HBO Max because it looks better, and okay. Let's just HBO Max is the HBO. So all of that aside, you're breaking news to me because I didn't hear this, and it's breaking my heart because of all the companies. If it goes to Comcast, oh god, that's going to be worse than Discovery because Comcast Universal just has a history of just really fucking things up, man. Oh, that's going to be brutal if that
Yeah, I'm
happens.
not looking forward to that.
Oh, oh no. Come on, Disney, do us a solid. Buy
That would never
HBO.
happen. That
You'll
one,
get
that one would be vetoed for sure.
you'll get
FTC would
DC
not
and
sign off on
Marvel.
that.
I know. DC wouldn't want that.
FTC.
I have to see.
They would be like,
But DC,
no.
oh my god, it would be nice though because then DC and Marvel could be under the same banner.
It would
Oh,
be nice to have competent leadership of DC.
yeah. Oh man, that's crazy. Look, just back to the House of the Dragon. Love it, man. Great show. The pacing is slow, but there's not a lot going on. But like you said, there's a lot that's about to happen. But the great thing, the difference between this and Game of Thrones was one, excessively violent, excessively sexual. Nothing wrong with that if it's a good story. But there were just so many plot threads from the very beginning. Way too many from the very beginning. And I think the big thing is at some point we're going to get more of the Starks in this world because they mentioned when Daenerys meets Jon Snow for the first time that the Starks and the Targaryens had a relationship that spanned hundreds of years, right? So obviously we're going to get a little bit more of the Starks.
Yeah, because as the Civil War kicks off, we're going to get to know more of the houses and as the battle lines get drawn.
Yep.
So as I'm sure they go into later seasons, we'll be
Yeah.
meeting more of the lords around Westeros that
Yep.
we haven't already.
I mean, they've talked about the Blackwater Bay, haven't they? I
Yeah,
thought I
they
heard him
brought up the
mention
Tullys and the River Run and the
Tullys.
River
Yep.
Lords. They brought up the Vale.
Yep.
So like the only one we saw a Stark. We haven't seen much of Dorne. They get name dropped as well. We've seen the Lannisters. The Martells got the name drop.
Nothing from the Baratheons at this point, I don't think.
I don't think so. I'd have to double check.
Yeah.
But
I don't
again, them
remember
and Stark got very loosely touched on, and I think that's going to be more later on in season 2 as the Dance of Dragons begins in earnest.
Yes.
Which I'm very excited about. Can't wait for season 2. That should be a very fun time.
Yep.
And a very big moneymaker for HBO.
Oh boy. So maybe they do the Disney thing where one show as soon as House of the Dragon ends, they kick off Jon Snow.
I could see them
next
try to
year.
do that. Like maybe every 6 months something starts.
Yeah.
I could see them try
Okay.
that. Plus, they still got to fit in Peacemaker season 2 somewhere.
Got to, man.
It's going to be great. So you had a question before we move on and we're going to do our reaction to the Last of Us trailer for me that I've never watched. You had a question for me.
Okay. Let's see here. What was my question? I know. Oh, it was MCU related. See, I didn't write it down, man. I screwed this up. I should have
Way
written
to
this down.
go, Susan.
I know. I thought of the question before we started rolling. It was involving the MCU, and now I'm broken because I've been talking about all these shows. I'm gonna have to think about it, man. We'll have to bring it up next
All right,
episode.
we'll bring it up episode 52 if we
Yes.
remember.
If I remember, if I can remember to write it down. Rhoda, make sure I remember.
All right, time to wrap it up. This has been a pretty good episode number 51, roughly an hour and 20-ish, depending on how I cut things out editing wise. Thanks everyone for watching. Be sure to follow us on our individual Twitters. I'm at MrWartburg. Fusion's at It's Mr. Fusion. Remember, we stream live over at twitch.tv/MrWartburg roughly every other week, maybe every week itself, especially if Daredevil shows up this week and She-Hulk will probably coming back Thursday night to talk about that because it's going to be incredible. If it happens, who knows? So be sure to stay tuned over there to stay up to date when we go live with our latest episode. Drop a subscribe here on YouTube. If you're on any audio platforms, definitely subscribe, rate, and review there. Plus, share the episode in Discord, on Twitter, various social medias. Help us grow the show. We would certainly appreciate it. And that's all I'm going to say on that because I don't like begging for people's time. So if you don't see anything else from us, see you for episode 52. If you're here live, we're going to react to the Last of Us trailer, and that's going to get broken out on YouTube too. See ya.